Amazingly, nobody was killed at last night's protest. This is the Get Your Ass to Work podcast, episode number 72, and last night, which was Sunday, we had another protest here in downtown Reno over the George Floyd incident, and it ended peaceful. So, first of all, let's thank everyone who kept the event peaceful, and let's thank the police officers who were pretty damn cool and accommodating to people coming into downtown, because the last time there was a protest, downtown Reno burned and is still recovering from the broken windows, car fires, and destruction, graffiti that happened because of the out-of-control protesters, and they allowed it to basically destroy downtown in the city area. But this time, there was an opposition. This time, there was anti-protest protesters down there who were not fucking around. Literally, every biker showed up in the city of Reno and stood on one side of the street in front of the casinos across from the town square where the protest was being held, sitting there with crossed arms, just looking menacing as fuck. I would say that if you were planning to do something, if you were planning to get rowdy and break windows and cause mayhem, that you thought twice and decided to go home and not do anything, because these guys were there to fuck you up. And they don't have rules like the police have rules. They don't give a shit. On top of there being at least 100, I mean minimum, I counted 75, but I didn't count all of them. I just took a look and kind of glanced over and saw at least 75 people. It was probably closer to 150 bikers. On top of that, several armed citizens attended this rally. There were people in full riot gear, just citizens, there for anti-protesting, anti-rioters. I mean, nobody there was really anti-protest. Nobody really was against the protest happening. Everybody was cool with the protest. I don't think I talked to anybody who thought that it was a bad idea or that they shouldn't be doing that. But there were people there to protect the city. And it was pretty tense. There were people on both sides, both the protester side and the armed citizen side, with headsets on, scouting each other out. Everybody pretty much knew who was who. Then there was the police presence, and they really stepped up their game because they didn't want to get embarrassed like what happened the previous week, where they were way undermanned and couldn't take control of the crowd, and Reno ended up burning because of that. But there was a huge police presence. There were people on rooftops with binoculars, police officers, scouting down at the crowds. So it was a pretty tense situation if you were a protester looking to screw up downtown Reno, get out of control, or think you were going to have a night of violence. Because if you were looking for that, you were going to get some violence, and you were going to be probably on the losing end of that one, because there were several militiamen stationed all around the protest, groups of 5 with long rifles. These are just citizens. These weren't cops. These weren't necessarily trained, hired security by the city. They didn't have rules. These were citizens ready to take action if people decided to go the wrong way with it. And me, well, I went to the protest. Number one, I wanted to see what was going to happen. And number two, I was so disgusted with what happened at the previous protest of people destroying the city that I was like, well, if something's going to happen, I'm going to be down there and at least be another set of eyes on the problem. And if anything else, protect anyone who may not be able to protect themselves if they get caught in the middle of something happening. I thought that it was pretty relaxed given the circumstances of racial tension. But, it was pretty interesting. I was looking across at all of the bikers lined up who you did not want to fuck with them. You just didn't. If you were a writer, Antifa, you were planning to do something, you looked at those guys and you're like, yeah, not going to happen. There are an interesting mix of races and ethnicities and of bikers out there. You know, it's not like one race of people against another race of people. In fact, most of the people there protesting and most of the opposition were white, but there was a lot of mixed races on each side. And it kind of relieves the tension in a way, but at the same time, it also builds it back up because there is a sense of intimidation coming from the bikers and coming from the armed militia. And there is a sense of not wanting to back down or not wanting to, say, be seen as weak by the protesters. But there was just no way that something like the previous week was going to happen where they were allowed to run wild, storm City Hall like they did, break all the windows in downtown, loot the buildings. And if that did happen, I mean, people were going to pay for doing that with violence coming from people who were there to protect downtown. And I don't know if that would have happened or not, but I'll tell you one thing for sure, it didn't happen. Now, I don't know if that would have happened if those guys, the bikers and the armed militia, didn't show up. I don't know if that would have happened. I don't know if they didn't show up, if there would have been a riot, but it sure as hell didn't happen with those guys there. So it could have been a peaceful protest and nothing could have happened, but we don't know that. And for damn sure, it didn't happen with them there. And everyone remained pretty damn cool. You know, I thought it was interesting seeing a biker having an argument with a protester, and the protester was a Latina girl with a sign saying something about cops suck dick, and the biker was a black guy, local from Reno, who was explaining he was there because he loves his city and he's there to protect Reno. I mean, it was interesting, and those were the kinds of conversations that I heard going on around me. It was interesting being in the middle of all of the conversations that were happening and listening to some of the talking points that people had. I mean, some of the bullshit and complaints and excuses that people had. I mean, a lot of it was emotional, irrational complaints, excuses, and bullshit about fuck the police and everybody holding their signs. But at the end of the day, everyone was pretty cool. The cops, we passed several of them walking in and out. They said, hey guys, be safe, have a good night, thanks for coming. I mean, the cops were just on their good behavior. Given the circumstances, I'm actually surprised that there wasn't more of an uprising in tensions and people actually getting violent, given that there was two opposing groups there, and one group of people were definitely down there to more or less kick ass if something got out of control. But everyone kept it cool. So I did hear something that one of the bikers said to one of the protesters, and the protester was saying, you know, you guys just come down here and you're looking to beat people up. And the biker, who was a black dude, he said, he's like, you know what? He's like, we're not here to beat people up. And you know what else? If you get beat up by a group of bikers, you've really fucked up and you've really done something stupid. And I thought that was really funny. And it pretty much was the end of that conversation. Nobody really had anything more to say about that. And everybody kind of talked. Bikers talked to protesters. You know, protesters didn't really approach the people in the GI outfits who were there with the long rifles. They did get a lot of banter and people passing by them, giving them a lot of grief, you know, saying, oh, I remember when I used to play dress up, you know, because they're there in full camo, fatigues, with their rifles, you know, extra clips on their vest. I mean, they were there, and, you know, they didn't necessarily look intimidating, so to speak. They not like the bikers looked intimidating, and so people would talk shit to them, and they just let it go. They just let people walk by, say whatever they wanted to say, and didn't really comment or respond, which is exactly what they were supposed to do. So, in reality, I would say most of the people who showed up, who were the anti-rioter type of people who the protesters hated. I mean, they hated seeing those types of people roll up because to them, it's exactly the type of people that they don't want confrontation with. They don't want to deal with that. I would say that the anti-protester people, the anti-riot people, more appropriately, behaved themselves. They weren't overly aggressive, obviously, because there were no fights or outbreaks. And at the same time, they did what they went down there to do, which was keep stuff from breaking out. I'm actually amazed it worked, given how tense it was and how many people were pissed off that they all showed up. But, the fact is there was a lot of people that showed up to protect downtown Reno and not let what happened the previous week happen again. And in a way, I think it was really, really good because it allowed the actual protest to run its course and everyone left peacefully and nothing happened. And that doesn't take away from George Floyd and their cause like I think the protest did the week before, because the week before, when you're out there protesting a cause, but then there's riots afterwards, you lose a lot of support. So if anything, these people helped keep, I don't know if it's peace or not, but they helped keep things from happening. Downtown didn't get violent. And in a way, it keeps the focus on where it was supposed to be intended to be anyway, which was the George Floyd incident. So as for me, I just walked around, talked to a lot of people, kind of saw what was going on, had a few laughs at some of the outfits people had on there. A lot of weird hippies came out of the woodwork to attend these things, drum circle people. It's entertaining, it's interesting, it's definitely educational to see what type of people are showing up to these protests, because I've never gone to one of these things before. And we hope that it stays, peaceful for the rest of however long shit's going to be protested for. And that's all I got for this week. If you guys have any questions about real estate, you can hit me up on Facebook or wherever you can find my phone number. I'm very searchable.